And Louise, you need to come off mute, love.
Good morning, everyone. So great to be here with you for the last platform talk in this series. I'm grateful for this opportunity. Let me move things around so I'm not blocking my screen. There we go. And I've enjoyed getting to know you all better. I also love taking the time to research our humanist history, learn more about the current leaders in our movement, and discover the contributions of those in the past, like Jerome Nathanson. Today, I'd like to get a little more personal before we jump into those isms and really explore those. I want to get a little more personal and tell you how I came to identify with ethical humanism. I was born a seeker. The curiosity of my youth has not left me, and I was an extremely curious child. At a very early age, I searched for a deeper meaning, which led me to being a devout Christian in a family of atheists. I became the youngest due-paying member in my small town Baptist church. And I cherish the memories of walking my dues down the church aisle and tucking my envelope into the steeple. It was a miniature church that served as a piggy bank of sorts for collections, and my head held high. I felt like an adult every time I walked my dues down the aisle. I was a studious congregation member. I read my Precious Moments Bible, religiously, and I asked a ton of questions, and most of them were about dinosaurs. I was a pretty innocent 11-year-old, and I loved going to church, especially when there was music. And I went on my own. My family did not go with me. And the music really did draw me in. In fact, I would perform solos and belt out hymns at all the local churches, which were, of course, all Christian. And the old rugged cross was one of my favorites. And I can still envision my tiny little girl self behind the podium at these various churches, belting out these cryptic words of this gospel song. And I was so sincere and so serious. And I clung to that old rugged cross, just like those lyrics invited me to do. I had a love for Jesus that was powerful. And I wanted to walk in love. That was my favorite thing that Jesus talked about. I even wrote poems for Jesus and tucked them in my Bible. After singing at the local Pentecostal church and seeing them filled with what I thought was the Spirit of Christ, I thought I had found my people. I find this notion ridiculous now because it ended in heartache, but I was totally mesmerized by their behavior, their oneness. I actually admired their zealousness, and I very much wanted the Lord to fill me so that I could speak in tongues too. But it never happened for me because I wanted it to be real, and it had to be real. Eventually, I was literally expelled from this church during a service for quietly giggling with a toddler who was playing peekaboo with me in her frilly pink Sunday best. And the preacher stopped the sermon and told me to leave and wasn't nice about it. And I was devastated. This time I'm walking down the row between the pews and feeling like a pariah, and my head is hanging low. And by the time I walked the short way home, I had become irate with the preacher. And all the doubts I had been repressing came bubbling up. I started to think about the negativity and the manipulation that they used to control me. I had devoted every Wednesday night and Sunday morning to this church, and I no longer felt welcome there. I spent 3 years of my short life as a part of this community, and not one person in the entire congregation had stood up for me or asked me to stay. And looking back, I realized the pastor was constantly frustrated with me because even through all the indoctrination, I asked a lot of questions. I refused to speak in tongues unless God willed it. And probably more importantly, I was never able to convince my parents to join the church. He pressured me to pressure them a lot. And I could see so clearly the game he was playing. You know, the jig was up. He just wanted my parents' money, what little of it they had. And I was nearly 14 years old. And the excruciating experience actually led me to become an atheist. Shedding my religion was painful. I still felt a resounding love for people and nature, but I became overwhelmed with a sense of betrayal and hopelessness. Coupled with other harmful personal events, the loss of my faith sent me deep into a deep depression. And the impermanence of life was maddening. The randomness of it all made no sense. My life ceased to have enough meaning, and I was thirsty for more. Thankfully, I was an avid reader and artist. I would stay up late at night reading, drawing, thinking. I also wrote a lot. I recall an essay published in my high school newspaper in which I compared Jesus to Santa Claus. And the vice principal, normally not a fan of mine, called me into her office. She thanked me for writing the essay and said it made her reconsider the stories we tell ourselves and our children. Even though she didn't understand my atheism, she appreciated my insight. I've always lived out loud like that. I don't remember how or why I picked up Kurt Vonnegut's Breakfast of Champions, but it resonated with me completely. Even as a brooding teenager, I laughed out loud at Vonnegut's storytelling. He was speaking to me, and his words were medicine for my soul. He was one of the main characters of the novel, science fiction writer Kilgore Trout. Let me just... I think someone may need to mute. There we go. But one of these main characters, Kilgore Trout, thought his life was over for him and that he would never make a difference or live up to his full potential. And even as my teenage self, I felt like that, like, oh, my life is over. Like I just put so much love and joy and nurturing into my religion and it was gone. Kilgore considered himself an artist who devoted his entire life to the search for truth and beauty and didn't find doodly squat. He felt that his life was pointless, and then he became a distinguished scholar in the field of mental health. In a way, he ended up on top very late in his life. And this gave me hope. The loss of my faith had made my life feel meaningless. And I had searched for my Lord and Savior, but like Trout, I had found doodly squat. Still, the possibility of being impactful gave me hope. And for me, through various plot lines throughout the book, Vonnegut was presenting a clear message. Whatever the state of one's existence, accepting your circumstances is easier if unencumbered by fantasies of divine intervention. He was telling me that I could shape my life, that I could make my own meaning, and he empowered me to do so. When I started to research Vonnegut to learn more about him as a person, I discovered his connection to secular humanism. The American Humanist Association had awarded him the Humanist of the Year award in 1992, and this was around the time that I had discovered him. And he served as the American Humanist Association honorary president from 1992 to 2007. Vonnegut came from a long line of freethinkers. He once said in an interview, "My ancestors who came to the United States a little bit before the Civil War were atheists, so I'm not rebelling against organized religion." When asked if he thought organized religion can make anybody happier, he famously said, "Oh, of course, lots of comforting lies are told in church. Not enough, but some." He summed up his humanism in a famous quote you may have heard. He once wrote, "Humanists try to behave decently and honorably without any expectation of reward or punishments in an afterlife. The creator of the universe has been unknown to us so far. We serve as well as we can to the highest abstraction, of which we have some understanding, which is our community." I turned out to be a humanist. I had always been. I hadn't lost any religion. I had finally found mine. And even though I discovered a life stance that aligned with my values, I hadn't yet discovered my congregation. So fast forward to about 7 years ago, I had just graduated with my master's degree in education, and I had been working an entry-level position at Lewis and Clark Community College in our media services department for about 4 years. You don't work at a community college to become rich. And I had to get my master's degree to continue teaching as an adjunct professor, which I'm now a full-time professor. But I needed a side hustle at that time to start paying those student loans, which still exist. So the job hunt was on. When I first found the listing for the social media manager position at the Ethical Society of St. Louis on LinkedIn, I got really excited. I knew that if the society was truly ethical and I was truly the right person for the job, I would be hired and I would succeed in spreading an awareness about a topic which I already cherished, humanism. I was hired, so the hiring process was obviously ethical. And just like that, I was introduced to ethical culture. I started to recognize the different flavors of humanism all around me, including my own. As I experienced how the congregation worked together to cultivate meaning and uplift their shared values, I truly embraced ethical humanism as my religion for the very first time. I had leveled up. Well, I was introduced to the goals and core values of humanism, first and foremost by my beloved Kurt Vonnegut, who wrote in The Sirens of Titan, "A purpose of life, no matter who is controlling it, is to love whoever is around to be loved." The movement and my involvement with it deepened my love for humanism and fostered my commitment to ethical culture. Well, all these flavors of humanism affirm that human beings have the right and responsibility to give meaning and shape their own lives. Ethical humanism is clear about the essential role that ethical principles play in human relationships. As the American Ethical Union states, ethical societies serve as religious congregations in which members can build a community of friends, find inspiration and purpose, provide moral education for their children, celebrate seasons and life events, and clarify their worldviews. All of this without comforting lies or a forced belief in the supernatural. The more I became involved with ethical culture, the more I realized I had truly found my people. The members of our movement support me as I strive to live my values. I could not ask for more. And even without knowing who ethical culture founder Felix Adler was, I had pretty much always tried to behave in a way that elicited the best in others and myself. Ethical culture just gave me those words to express how I'd always felt in my heart. Our core values spoke to my strong desire for social justice, and I could see how ethical action can make the world a more fair and just place for all people. The more I learned about ethical culture, the more I realized I wanted to be a leader with a capital L, a professional ethical culture leader. You know, in case you don't know, leaders fill the roles of religious clergy within the ethical culture movement and on college campuses as chaplains. They meet the pastoral needs of members, perform ceremonies, and serve as spokespeople for the congregation. I want to help spread humanistic values throughout space and time, connecting others with resources, information, and support that they need to not only live meaningful lives, but to also further the growth of ethical humanism. I appreciate that in order to be a humanist, I do not have to embrace comforting lies. In fact, once presented with new facts and evidence, I can indeed change my mind. I appreciate that each of us creates our own flavor of humanism. And as a leader, I want to meet people on common ground and build communities of support and love through radical inclusion and open communication. I truly believe everyone deserves to be treated fairly and kindly. I'm sure we all have stories about how we became to identify with our isms, and that was one of mine. Because in actuality, I identify with several isms, from atheism to socialism, and the chances are you do too. So I wanted to do a little poll. Oh, I accidentally jumped ahead here. Let me go back. There we go. And let me open the poll. Now, there are so many isms that we could not fit them in one question. So this poll is imperfect, just like I am, just like everyone is. But I would like you to take this survey and tell me the isms that speak to you. Which of these match your personal identity? And you can select as many as are true from all the questions. So there's 3 questions. Ignore choice 3 on question number 3. Zoom was being difficult and it was too hard to delete. But which of these match your personal identity? And like I said, select every single one of them that does. I have the definitions that I want to be going over while you take the survey. So let's start with ethical culturists. And it was kind of hard to find these definitions for every single one of these isms that I thought were honest and true and unbiased, but also spoke to me. So I use different sources and I include them here with the definitions. So as you take the survey, let me go over these isms. So ethical culturists believe what they wish on all issues, including religion, but they generally subscribe to the following ideas: the intrinsic worth of every human being, the importance of seeking ethical principles as a guide to all aspects of life, the need to work for the material and spiritual betterment of society and humanity. And that's from the encyclopedia. Humanists believe that reason, experience, and evidence, and not faith, are the best ways of finding out about the universe and the world around us. They base their morality on what will best contribute to human welfare and human fulfillment. And I really like this definition. It's from an organ donation site in the UK, but I just really love the definition. Secular humanists do not believe in the otherworldly tenets of religion, but they do believe in the noble and righteous things of this world, such as cooperation, reason, education, science, humor, inquiry, democracy, compassion, tolerance, imagination, open debate, and human rights. And this is from our friend Phil Zuckerman. He wrote a lovely essay in Psychology Today about secular humanism. Ethical humanists believe in a progressive philosophy of life without supernaturalism that affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. For ethical humanists, the ultimate religious questions are not about the existence of gods or an afterlife, but rather, how can we create meaningfulness in this life? And how should we treat each other? And of course, this is from the American Ethical Union, which I find as the authority and the expert in ethical humanism. Religious or congregational humanists believe in an integration of non-theistic humanist ethical philosophy with congregational rights and community activity, which center on human needs, interests, and abilities. And that's from Wikipedia. Biocentrists believe all life deserves equal moral consideration and has equal moral standing, according to Britannica. Atheists believe that there are no deities. That's from Wikipedia. Atheism is more about a lack in a belief than it is about what they believe. Agnostics are a little trickier to define. While very few agnostics, about 3%, say they believe in God as described by the Bible, a clear majority, 62%, say they believe in some other kind of spiritual force. Just 3 in 10 say there is no higher power in the universe. And this is from the Pew Research Center. I did research on agnostics, and like I said, they were a little trickier to define. Unitarian Universalists believe all sorts of things. Unitarian Universalism is a faith that houses many different beliefs, according to the church, the Unitarian Universalist Church of Elgin. Idealists believe that very good things can be achieved, often when this does not seem likely to others. That's from the Cambridge Dictionary. Realists believe that there are no universal principles with which all states may guide their actions. Instead, a state must always be aware of the actions of the states around it and must use a pragmatic approach to resolve problems as they arise. And that is the definition from Wikipedia. Pragmatists are more concerned with matters of fact than with what could or should be. A pragmatic person's realm is results and consequences. If that's where your focus is, you may want to apply the word to yourself. And this is from the Merriam-Webster Dictionary. Behaviorists emphasize the outward behavioral aspects of thought and dismiss the inward experimental and sometimes the interprocedural aspects as well. John Dewey was a famous behavioralist, and this definition is from the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Marxists believe that economic and social conditions, and especially the class relations that derive from them, affect every aspect of an individual's life, from religious beliefs to legal systems to cultural frameworks. And that's Wikipedia. Postmodernists, according to PBS, are skeptical of explanations which claim to be valid for all groups, cultures, traditions, or races, and instead focus on the relative truths of each person. I see a lot of postmodernism in our movement. Socialists believe that society as a whole, rather than private companies, should own or control various goods and services. And that is a definition from vocabulary.com. Communists believe we should replace private property and profit-based economy with public ownership and communal control of at least the major means of production, like mines, mills, factories, and the natural resources of a society. And communism is actually a form of socialism. Exactly how communism differs from socialism has long been a matter of debate. But the distinction rests largely on the communist adherence to the revolutionary socialism of Karl Marx. And this is according to Britannica. And capitalists believe in several key economic points. So economic freedom leads to political freedom, and having a state-owned means of production can lead to federal overreach and authoritarianism. They view it as the only sensible way to organize a society. So they insist that alternatives like socialism and communism or anachronisms are doomed to fail, because they also believe that the competition between companies benefits consumers by making products more affordable, and that capitalism's dog-eat-dog atmosphere encourages people to work harder to achieve their dreams. And I love this definition, so props to Teen Vogue, which, by the way, I read Teen Vogue online, and it is an amazing publication. So that's a lot of isms and approaches to life. And then, of course, you may not identify with any of these. So I just want to pause and make sure everyone's done before I share the results.
Actually, I think we're all having a little trouble accessing the poll.
It
is still live.
People who are co-hosts can't do it.
Yes.
Vandra, you're a co-host.
Oh, it came up for me then. All right.
Yeah.
You can see it, but you can't vote.
You can't do it. You can't
okay,
do it.
all right, fine.
Okay, so you should be able to see the results now. And one of the things I want to note is, there's lots of different people identifying with lots of different isms. So just take a moment and kind of explore that. And as I have these up, now I want you to think, okay, you've selected all these things that you identify as. Which ones would you give up? If you only had to choose 3 of your isms, which 3 would you choose?
So Louise, I'm not seeing this. I'm not seeing the results.
It says they're being shared. It asked me to stop sharing. Can anyone else see the results?
I can see the results. Maybe it's useful if you read them over.
I can.
I saw the results. It left.
Louise, maybe if you read the results, they're fascinating.
Yeah, so we have 57% ethical culturists, 86% humanist, 86% secular humanist, 86% ethical humanist, 29% religious or congregational humanist, even though you are all here at church on Sunday, I'm just saying. We have one biocentrist, two atheists, so 29% atheists, 14% agnostic, that's one agnostic, no Unitarian Universalists. We have 71% idealist, and I think Adler was often called an idealist. We have 86% realist, 43% pragmatist. Nobody identifies as a behaviorist. We have one person who is an existentialist. We have 29% Marxist, 14% postmodernist, 86% socialist, 43% communist. Nobody identifies as a capitalist. And 43% kind of said, I don't identify with any of these. So now, if you want to put in the chat or just make a note personally, which three, if you had to give them all up and you can only choose three, which three would you choose? And for me, I think it would be ethical humanist. I do think I'm an idealist, and I'm definitely a socialist. So if I had to pick three, those would be my three. Now, narrow it down to just one, okay? You can only keep one, and you must choose which is most important to you. Which is it? Again, either put it in the chat or make a mental note and just kind of think. Now, what does your choice mean to you? Why was it the most important? Did you make the right choice? Was it easy to give up pieces of your identity? Or in other words, was it easy to give up the isms with which you most identify? Was it fair to have to do so? No, it wasn't fair. I did that on purpose. But I just wanted to show you, that's one of the things that I love about ethical culture. You don't have to abandon any of your beliefs. You don't have to get rid of any of your identities or any of your isms unless you want to. We are free to question. We are free to believe. But we know that how we treat each other is infinitely more important than our personal beliefs. Of course, when I know better, I need to do better. And I agree to accept responsibilities for my choices. But I am not tied down to dogma. The AEU doesn't dictate how individual societies behave, and leaders don't boss around congregation members. In fact, pastoral caregiving and leading a congregation both boil down to being present, listening, and asking questions to listen some more. Leaders shouldn't be making the decisions. And it's not their job to keep everybody in line. The congregation shapes the society under the leader's care. The same goes for pastoral care. As a pastoral caregiver, you are supposed to be a calming presence. The care seeker feels safe enough to share and explore their feelings and options, and ultimately they decide on the path forward that they discovered themselves. I learned this firsthand when I spent time at Eden Theological Seminary as a part of my leader training. I took a class on pastoral care, and I loved it. But at first, I was so nervous. The first night when I had to show up, I was just a wreck. I knew I would be in a mostly Christian space, and I also knew we would be role-playing. How could I compete with up-and-coming clergy who had God on their sides? I thought they would know all the right things to say at seminary. I had no holy book, and I would be at a loss. But the opposite was true. My professor, Dr. Kristen Leslie, wouldn't let my classmates say things like, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, or your loved one is in a better place now, or everything happens for a reason. Dr. Leslie said that those phrases diminish the pain and or dilemma of the community member. She disqualified all their Christian colloquialisms as dismissive and harmful, and they are. So I excelled at our caregiving role-playing sessions because I was a humanist. I was curious, I asked questions, and I centered the care seeker's dignity and worth. I understood there is no one right way to live, right? Jerome Nathanson talked about that in one of our quotes. I allowed my role-playing classmates to unfold the challenges they were facing, to unpack their feelings, and to decide on desired outcomes. All of these approaches came from the ethical humanist values I embrace, the ones that I strive to live. As ethical humanists, we empower others. We do not shame them. We do not expel them because of a giggle. We do not exclude them based on their beliefs. And this is where, for me, our future can be the brightest. When we call people into that beautiful place where relationships bring out the best and allow us to recognize our strengths and enable us to decide which things we need to work on personally and as a community, we know we must be good caretakers of ourselves, of each other, and of the planet on which we live. We don't believe the earth was gifted to us by some supreme being for us to pillage and degrade. We know we have an ethical responsibility to cherish our home planet and all the life on it. Not because some book tells us we have to, but because we know it's the right thing to do. We know future generations depend on our ethical actions right now. We know this because we are present with one another and in this world. There is such a power in being present, and at the same time, it is a gift to others. This being human together is a beautiful approach. It keeps us grounded in the realities of others and in our own reality. We're able to reflect and learn and grow. And because we're paying attention, we also know these are uncertain times in so many ways. And on top of everything else, the ethical culture movement is having a watershed moment. But opportunities often arise from crisis. Ethical humanism has a rich history, and it also has so much potential. And we, hands down, have the best music at our meetings. That alone is worth saving. In all seriousness, though, this space, this place where we seek higher ground, where we gather to be in relationship, to make meaning, to honor our humanity, to empower each other. This space that we hold is unique. It is important. It means so much to so many, and it means a hell of a lot to me. At its best, ethical humanism honors, as Jerome Nathanson said, our obligation to recognize better opinions and appreciate people's differences, not merely as tolerable, but as the essence of a rich and rewarding human experience. These are two important approaches to consider as we move forward into the future of ethical humanism. I also implore you to be present right now, to be involved, to recognize the challenges and prospects that we currently have and the ones that we'll have in the future. Our movement is what we make of it. And most of all, I challenge you to show up, to give that gift of your presence to yourself and to others. Now, there's lots of ways to show up, but one of the ways that you can do so is to attend our upcoming workshop on Thursday. It's the second workshop and the last event in Brooklyn's series on Felix, Adler, and modern humanism. I'm eager to discuss your thoughts on all things humanism. So you can learn more about that. And it's the same Zoom link that you're in right now. Another way you can be involved is to join the final AEU listening session, and it's on June 3rd. And the video from the first listening session is already on the AEU website. It's on their YouTube page. And I recommend you give it a watch. I hope the video from the second session, which was yesterday, is up soon. I appreciate all of you. I cherish our time together. Humanism enriches my life, and I would not have the meaningful life that I have without it. So as we say in St. Louis, thank you for being here today for yourself and others.
Thank you, Louise.